I realized my little sister was fully brainwashed by our parents the day she thanked them for destroying her own wedding. Not forgave. Not accepted. She thanked them. She stood in our parents' kitchen, mascara streaked down her face, saying they had saved her soul, while the man she loved sat in his car outside with the ring still in his pocket. As her older sister, that was the moment I understood something I had been avoiding for years. I hadn't just disagreed with our parents' way of raising us. I had lost my sister to them. We grew up in a house where love always came with a sermon and a condition attached. My parents weren't just strict, they ran our home like a tiny church with 2 unquestionable leaders and 2 followers. They were the authorities, and we were their project. There were rules for everything. No sleepovers. No phones or social media without them knowing every password. No friendships with worldly kids. No pants for girls. No music that wasn't Christian. Every decision, from what we wore to what we studied, had to be prayed over and approved. Mom's favorite line was, "God talks to parents first. Daughters hear God through obedience." Dad's was, "If you disagree with us, you're disagreeing with God himself." You can imagine how well that went once I hit 14 and realized I had my own thoughts. I started asking why we couldn't go to birthday parties, why my best friend was suddenly a bad influence, why reading a fantasy novel counted as sin. It didn't take long for me to become the rebellious one. Groundings, lectures, hours of Bible verses about obedience. I cried myself to sleep so many nights I lost count. Emily chose a different strategy. She was quieter, softer, always watching. While I pushed back, she folded herself into whatever shape they wanted. She learned to survive by being perfect. She agreed. She smiled. She echoed their opinions like a mirror. She never said, "I want," only "I feel led." She never said, "I'm hurt," only "I'm grateful for correction." When I got in trouble, she would sneak into my room after the shouting was over, sit on the edge of my bed, and whisper, "Just apologize, okay? Don't make them more angry. It's not worth it." Back then I thought she was just being practical. Now I know, that was a kid trying to stay safe. The first time I realized how deep it ran, I was 15 and she was 12. Dad blew up at dinner because I rolled my eyes when he called college a liberal brainwashing camp. He slammed his fork on the table, shoved his chair back, and went on a rant about disrespect and hell and how this house is not a democracy. When I tried to stand up, he grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks. Later that night I sat on my bed, my heart still pounding, that awful mix of rage and shame in my throat. Emily slipped into my room and closed the door quietly. I thought she was finally going to say, "That was too much. He went too far." Instead she said, very softly, "You know he only shouts because he's scared for you, right?" I laughed, short and bitter. "He hurt me, Em. That's not fear, that's control." She flinched at the word control like I had cursed in church. "Don't say that. If you hadn't rolled your eyes, he wouldn't have had to get so upset. You know his heart is good. Mom says you twist everything." That last sentence hit me harder than his grip had. "You twist everything." It was one of Mom's favorite accusations, and hearing it come out of my sister's mouth felt wrong. Like I was listening to a recording playing through her. I didn't have the language back then to call it brainwashing. I just knew my sister was disappearing into something I couldn't fight. I got out first. I fought to go to college out of town. My parents only agreed after convincing themselves I was going to be a missionary to the lost. I nodded along because arguing would have kept me trapped. Leaving that house felt like learning how to breathe. With distance, everything looked different. I met families where parents apologized when they were wrong. I met Christians who went to therapy. I learned words like emotional abuse, control, and enmeshment, and suddenly my childhood snapped into focus. Emily stayed. While I was held up as a cautionary tale in church, she became the shining example, the good daughter, the obedient one, such a blessing. Mom bragged about her modesty, her purity, her loyalty. When I came home for breaks, she would curl up next to me and ask, "What's it like, living on your own?" Then she would rush to add, "Not that I want that. I'm just curious." We had rare, fragile moments when the mask cracked. Once, when she was 17, she called me from our bathroom, whispering like a hostage. "If I ever leave," she asked, "will you help me?" I was 20, sitting in my dorm room. "Of course I'll help you," I said. "I will drive down at 3 in the morning if I have to. Just say the word." There was a long pause, just her shaky breathing. "Okay," she whispered. I just needed to know I had somewhere to go. The next day she texted me, "Ignore what I said last night. I was being dramatic. I'm fine. I'm blessed." That last word, blessed, was straight out of Mom's mouth. That was the night I started to worry I might never really get her out. Then Emily met Jake. Jake was the kind of guy I never imagined my sister would be allowed to date. He was kind and awkward and genuinely listened when she spoke. He worked in IT, loved dumb sci-fi movies, and actually asked her opinion. He wasn't from our church, but he believed in God in a way that didn't require turning your brain off. The first time I met him, he shook my hand and said, "Your sister's told me so much about you. She says you're the bravest person she knows." I almost cried right there in the coffee shop. My parents hated him instantly. They tried to act polite at first, but I saw it. The way Dad's jaw tightened when Jake disagreed with him. The way Mom's smile thinned every time Jake asked Emily, "What do you think?" instead of looking to Dad. After dinners, as soon as the door closed behind Jake, Dad would say, "That boy is arrogant. He doesn't respect authority." Mom would sigh and add, "I don't feel peace in my spirit about him. God is warning us." When I asked what exactly he had done wrong, they never had a real answer. Just words like pride, worldly, rebellious. What they meant was, he treated my sister like a person, not a child. Emily, for once, didn't fold. She kept seeing him. She talked about dreams that had nothing to do with staying in our parents' house forever. When Jake proposed and she said yes, she called me before anyone else. I answered to the sound of her crying and laughing. "I'm getting out," she whispered. "I'm finally getting out, sis." As her big sister, I felt something unclench in my chest. "You deserve this," I told her. "You really, really do." I wish I could end the story there. Instead, my parents declared spiritual war. At first it was little comments. "Are you sure you prayed enough about this? Marriage is forever. You can't rush it. We just don't feel peace when we pray about Jake." Then they pulled out the big guns, counseling with our pastor, a man who had known us since we were kids and never once told my parents no. Week after week, Emily sat on the couch between them while they talked at her about headship, submission, being equally yoked. They said that if Jake didn't join our church and come under Dad's covering, the relationship was out of God's order. They insisted God would not bless a marriage where the husband didn't accept her father as his authority. Yes, my dad literally expected to be the spiritual boss of his adult son-in-law. When Emily pushed back, and she did, at first, they changed tactics. Suddenly, she was drenched in affection. Mom made her favorite meals. Dad bragged about her from the pulpit. They bought her a new Bible with her name engraved in gold. And between all that sweetness, they slipped in poison. Men will tell you they love you, but they leave. Parents are forever. What if he pulls you away from us? What if he decides you can't bring the kids to church? What if you end up divorced and broken because you ignored God's warning? On the phone, I tried to cut through the fog. This isn't God. This is control." Sometimes she would agree in a rush, words tumbling out. "I know. Jake says the same thing. I just feel so guilty. It's like I'm tearing them apart." Other times her voice went flat. "They're not perfect, but they're still our parents. They sacrificed everything for us. That line was one of Dad's favorites. 3 weeks before the wedding, they called a family meeting. Just our parents, Emily, me, and the pastor. Jake wasn't invited because this is about our daughter's soul. When I walked into the living room, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, shoulders hunched, fingers twisting her engagement ring. Dad opened with a long prayer about rebellion and obedience. Then the interrogation began. Emily, do you believe your parents hear from God? Yes. Do you believe we only want what's best for you? Pause. She glanced at me. Yes. Then why are you moving forward with a marriage we feel no peace about? Mom pushed a box of tissues toward her before she even cried. Every time Emily said, I love Jake, they shot back with lines they'd used on us for years. Love is not a feeling, it's obedience. Your heart is deceitful. We see danger you can't see. At one point Emily broke. What would make you happy, she sobbed. Me dying alone in this house? Mom squeezed her hand. We would rather see you single and pure than married and separated from God. It was the most honest thing either of them said all night. When it was finally over, Emily looked hollow. As we walked down the hallway, she caught my arm. If I cancel the wedding, she whispered, will you hate me? My throat burned. I pulled her into a hug. I could never hate you, I said. I hate what they're doing to you. But whatever you decide, I'm here. A week later, she called Jake and ended the engagement. She did it alone, in her bedroom, because our parents told her God needed undivided obedience. Afterward they took her phone so she wouldn't call him again. I found out from Jake. He texted me, I don't know what they said to her, but this isn't her. I can't fight your whole family. When I arrived the next day, the house felt tense and celebratory at the same time. Emily was in the kitchen with Mom. Her eyes were swollen, but she was smiling. Dad put a hand on my shoulder. God has delivered your sister, he said. We broke a generational curse. I walked past him to Emily. Are you okay? I asked. She looked at me with a bright, almost feverish expression. I'm free, she said. The words sounded wrong. I started, if they pressured you. Her voice went sharp. Don't start. I made a choice. I did. Then she turned to our parents. Thank you for fighting for me when I was too blind to fight for myself, she said. Thank you for not letting me throw my life away. I know I hurt you by not listening at first. I'm so grateful you didn't give up on me. Mom burst into tears and hugged her. Dad started praying loudly, thanking God for breaking the spirit of rebellion. I just stood there. Because that wasn't my sister talking. That was my parents, word for word, coming out of her mouth. I'd heard those lines 100 times, just never in her voice. That was the day I stopped telling myself she was just trying to keep the peace. They didn't need to lock her in that house anymore. They had moved inside her head. The months after that only proved it. She sent me long messages about how God had shown her that Jake was an idol, that she had been deceived. Whenever I asked, but what do you feel, she answered, Mom and Dad helped me see, and repeated their arguments almost exactly. She blocked Jake on everything for her peace. She said she burned his letters. Within a year, she was dating a guy from our church who adored my parents. He called my father sir and asked his permission for everything. They were married 6 months later. At the wedding, the pastor smiled into the microphone and said, "This is what it looks like when children trust their parents and honor God's design." Emily stood at the altar in a modest dress Mom had chosen, her hair done the way Dad liked it, smiling that small, careful smile she'd practiced her whole life. She looked calm. Watching her, my heart ached. She really believed this was safety. She thought she was walking into something holy. She had no idea she was just stepping from one cage into another. We're both adults now, at least on paper. I live in another city, low contact with our parents, going to a different kind of church where questions aren't treated like sins. I've sat in enough therapy sessions to finally say the words abuse and control out loud. I am slowly building a life that is mine. Emily has 2 little boys and an Instagram full of Bible verses and family photos. She calls Mom every day. When we talk, it often feels like I'm chatting with a kind, polite stranger who happens to have my sister's laugh. If I mention boundaries or therapy or anything about our childhood, she shuts it down. I don't want to dig up old wounds, she says. God has healed me. I'm grateful for how we were raised. It kept us from so much evil. Sometimes, just for a moment, there's a wobble in her voice. Sometimes I hear an echo of that 17-year-old in the bathroom. But the next sentence is always straight from our parents' script. I used to argue. I sent her articles, podcasts, threads about religious trauma. I begged her to talk to a therapist once. Every time, she pulled back a little further. So now I do the only thing that feels even a little healthy. I love her where she is. I answer when she calls. I send birthday presents to my nephews. I keep my door and my heart open. Because even if they own her mind right now, I have to believe some small, quiet part of her still belongs to herself. And if the day ever comes when she whispers again, "Sis, if I leave, will you help me?" I'll grab my keys, get in my car, and drive through the night. I couldn't save her from being brainwashed. But if she ever decides to step out of the fire, she won't have to do it alone. Maybe that's all I can be for her now, not a savior, not a preacher, just a woman who made it out first, standing outside the door with the car running and the porch light on, waiting for her little sister to decide she's ready to step into the dark and trust there's something better on the other side.